Hi, my name's Paul Grogan and welcome to the fourth in a series of videos where I'm going to be teaching you how to play Aeon Trespass Odyssey. In this video I'll be continuing directly on from part 3, further explaining the battle phase with more of a focus on the Titans themselves. You'll need to have watched my previous video before watching this one. Although I'll be making every effort to ensure that these videos are correct at the time of recording, publishers sometimes issue errata or clarifications to the rules of their games, so I'd strongly recommend checking the description of this video for any changes to the rules which have been made after this video has been released. Also, be sure to check out the official list of errata and clarifications which can be found on the game's website. A big thank you to Into the Unknown for commissioning me to create these videos, but I also rely on the support of my Patreon campaign to keep the channel going. So if you are interested in supporting me directly, you can do so at patreon.com/gamingrules. As mentioned in the previous video, battles consist of a primordial round where the enemy resolves an AI card, attacking one or more Titans, followed by a Titan round, during which each Titan gets to take a turn in whatever order you want to, and you don't have to go in the same order each round. Before going into the details, let's take a quick look at each Titan. First, there is the Titan sheet. This contains your default trauma table and your default Kratos table, and some other important information. At the start of the campaign, you only have access to the Dreamwalker Titans. Even though these Titans are individually named, they are all just the same, except for the illustration, which helps you remember which miniature on the board is yours. In other words, if one of these Titans dies in battle, you just reuse the same sheet and mini for the next battle. Later in the campaign, you will unlock additional types of Titan known collectively as Argo-bred Titans, and the game has one sheet for each. So even if you have more than one of these Titans on board the Argo, you can only use one of each type in a battle. This icon here shows the inherent power for this Titan's attack, one red power die for Dreamwalkers. This die is added to each attack that scores at least one hit. The speed value shows the maximum number of spaces that a Titan can move with a move action. Dreamwalkers also have a rush ability, which allows them to use both their movement and combat actions together, but it only works if their danger is 2 or more, and it costs them 1 fate to use. The trauma table shows you which severity of trauma card you draw whenever you are dealt danger from a Primordial's attack. The Kratos table shows you what additional abilities you have access to as your rage increases over the course of the fight. If a line has more than one ability on it, you get to choose which one of them to use. A full explanation of these abilities can be found on the back of the Titan sheets. Certain events in the game will cause your Titans to gain new pattern cards such as these. If a Titan gains a special pattern card, the Titan must be named, and if the Titan dies, any assigned pattern cards are returned to the box. Some later Kratos tables are special, and you get to use both of the abilities on the line. You also have your Triskelion, which tracks your rage, fate and danger. Depending on the story events and adventures leading up to this fight, you may already have gained some of these before the battle starts. And remember, they only reset to 0 at the end of a battle. Each Titan starts the battle with a number of equipped gear cards, including weapons, armour, support cards and so on. On these cards, anything on the left side is an offensive stat used when attacking, and anything on the right side is a defensive stat used when being attacked by a Primordial. The lower half of each card lists its abilities, of which there are many types available, and a number of them use keywords which are all explained in the back of the rulebook. Each Argonaut should also have their Nemos cards and Fated Nemos cards nearby. The Fated Nemos cards have a negative effect on them, which is always active. The regular Nemos cards have positive abilities, which are divided into 3 levels. Which ones you have access to depends on how much you have advanced the card, as explained in the previous videos. I'll cover the use of these abilities later in this video. As mentioned, during the Titan round, each Titan takes a turn in whatever order you like, and you can change the order each round. However, one Titan must finish their turn completely before the next Titan starts theirs. On a Titan's turn, you get 1 movement action and 1 combat action, which you can resolve in any order. All actions are optional. You are not forced to move or attack if you don't want to, but actions cannot be saved for a later turn. However, if you are in a position where you either don't want to perform an action, there is another use for them. You may use your movement or combat actions to unexhaust all of your gear cards and any other components you have which are currently exhausted. I'll explain how cards get exhausted later. For example, it's Herodotus' turn. He would like to move and attack, but he only has a melee weapon equipped and his speed is only 5, so he cannot reach the Primordial. He uses his movement action to move towards it, but then instead of attacking, he uses his combat action to unexhaust these two cards. As well as your movement and combat actions, you may also have a number of free actions available to you, such as these abilities on this Nemos card. I'll explain free actions later in this video, but the important thing is that once you have completed your second action, your turn immediately ends, and there is no opportunity for any free actions. Once your turn is over, rotate your Argonaut card to indicate that you have taken your turn so that you know which Titans are still left to act. After all Titans have taken a turn, the Titan round is over. Rotate all of the Argonaut cards back to an upright position. The movement action is, as you might expect, what you use to move your mini on the board. You may move a number of spaces up to your speed value. You move one space at a time, resolving the effects of any terrain tiles that you move through. Movement is always orthogonal and never diagonal. You cannot move through other Titans or the Primordial. You can, however, move through terrain tiles unless they have the keyword obstacle or chasm. This includes not being able to move through the red lines of a labyrinth tile. Green lines are okay though. As part of a single movement action, you cannot move onto the same space twice. Sometimes you'll be able to move your Titan as the result of a trauma card or other effect, such as this reposition ability. These are collectively known as move-like abilities, and they follow all of the same rules as normal movement, but are not considered a movement action. Also, any movement done as part of a movement action or move-like ability is voluntary and completely optional. You don't have to move your full speed when moving, and that reposition 2 ability, you could choose to just reposition 1 or not at all. Any movement caused by an opposing force, such as a primordial, is involuntary movement, which I'll cover later in this video. The combat action is what you use to attack the primordial, try and wound it, and ultimately win the fight. When you perform an attack, follow the 10 steps of the attack sequence, which are shown on the back of the Titan sheets. As you can see, attacking is a very detailed process, and it's important that you follow these steps carefully and in order. Essentially though, the process is 2 main parts: working out if you hit the primordial, and then if you do, determining if you manage to wound it. Step 1 is to choose one of your unexhausted weapons to be your active weapon for this attack. Here, your javelin, which has the keyword cumbersome, has been exhausted from a previous successful attack, so you must choose your shield to attack with. Remember, shields are actually weapons too. Also, the primordial must be within range of the weapon. If no range is listed on the weapon, you must be adjacent, which as always does not count diagonally. The javelin, for example, assuming it was ready, has a range of 2 to 4, therefore it cannot be used when adjacent. Some weapons have the reach keyword, which means that they can attack from up to the depicted number of spaces away. This Liontail whip has reach 2, so it can be used from here. Reach weapons can still be used when adjacent. Reach weapons are similar to ranged weapons in that they allow you to attack from a distance, but reach weapons and ranged weapons are technically different for the purposes of other game effects. For example, the rush ability on each Dreamwalker Titan allows you to rush with a melee or reach weapon, but not a ranged weapon. And note that if you do rush with a reach weapon, you must stop moving once you move to a space which you can attack from. Therefore, if you were attacking with a weapon with reach 2 and were here, you could not rush, since you would need to move at least 3 spaces to rush. If you were here though, that would be okay. And finally, a Titan must have line of sight to be able to attack. Line of sight was fully explained in my previous video. Step 2 of the attack sequence is to increase your Titan's rage by 1. This is a commonly forgotten thing, so try to get into the habit of doing it before anything else. If your rage was already at 9 and would go to 10, your Titan breaks free from the Triskelion connection and will die immediately after your combat action, unless you manage to kill the Primordial with your attack. If your rage ever increases and is now higher than any other Titan, you gain the priority target token. Step 3 is the attack roll. Take a number of d10s as indicated by the weapon you are attacking with. One of those dice must be white and the rest must be black. Then roll the dice. Any precision bonus you have is added to each result. The Kratos Copis, for example, has a +1. Don't actually change the value on the dice, just mentally add the precision bonus. You also get a +1 to each die for each opening token in the Kratos pool. I'll talk about these tokens more later on, but the more opening tokens you have in the pool, the better, as they increase your chance to hit. Each die with a modified result equal to or higher than the Primordial's to hit value is a hit. In this example, because you are attacking with the Kratos Copis and have 2 opening tokens in the Kratos pool, each die is at +3, so you hit twice. And like with evasion rolls, you can gain fate to reroll any number of your dice, 1 fate per die. You must choose how many dice to reroll first, gain the fate, and then reroll them. If you manage to hit with all of your dice, you have achieved what is known as a full hit. If you have any full hit abilities on your active weapon, resolve them now. On the flip side, if you miss with all of your dice, you have achieved a full miss, which is very bad. You must resolve any full miss abilities you have, but also you skip steps 4 to 8 of the combat sequence and go straight to step 9. A natural roll of a 10 is always considered a hit, and a natural roll of a 1 is always a miss, no matter how many modifiers you apply. But like when rolling evasion, the white crit die is special. A natural 10 on the crit die means that you have a chance of scoring a critical hit, which can be very rewarding. And remember, you can use fate to re-roll your dice, even if you hit. So if you really wanted to do a critical hit and your white dice rolled a hit but wasn't a critical, you could use fate to re-roll it in the hope that you get a 10. But it is a bit risky, as you might miss. If you roll a natural 1 on the white die, it is a crit miss, and you must apply any crit miss abilities you have. And if you think you can just use fate to re-roll a crit miss, then it's not that easy. A crit miss happens if your initial roll on the white die is a 1, even if you then re-roll it. And if you do re-roll it and get another 1, you must resolve the crit miss a second time. Note that a crit miss is not the same as a full miss. A crit miss just means that you rolled a 1 with the white die. You may still hit with your other dice, whereas a full miss means that you've missed with all of your dice. Step 4 of the attack sequence is the first ability window. At this point, you get to activate any of your abilities that can be specifically used in this first ability window. Abilities used in this window usually improve your own attack. For example, if you rushed, you gain Auto Break 1. Auto Break is an ability used in the first ability window which puts a break token into the Kratos pool. Step 5 is to draw a body part card, or BP card for short. Like the AI cards, the Roman numeral on the back of the deck indicates its level. At the start of the fight, the BP deck is made up of 6 level 1 cards, but as you wound the primordial, it escalates, adding BP2 and BP3 cards to the deck. Always be aware of the level of the BP card on top of the deck, and take that into account when making your choices during the round. First, reveal the top card from the BP deck. This represents the part of the monster that you are hitting. The number in the middle is the first thing to look at. This is the value of the primordial's Aeon Trespass field, or AT value for short. This is how hard it will be to inflict a wound. In the lower half of the card are the responses, a list of things that the primordial will do in response to your attack. You should take these into account now, as they may impact your decisions in the next step. A fail response will happen if you fail to wound it. A wound response happens if you succeed in wounding it. And an instinct response happens whether you wound it or not. But when you were rolling to hit earlier, if you rolled a 10 on the white die, you gain a crit chance, which is a chance that the attack scores a critical hit, but only if you manage to wound it. In this case, you only resolve the critical response and ignore the others. Note that rolling a 10 on the crit die is just a chance to score a critical hit. You still have to actually wound it to get the critical. Step 6 is the power roll, which will determine whether or not you wound the primordial. It is further divided into 5 sub-steps which are resolved in order. First, create your power pool by taking the required number of power dice, which are the red, black and white ones with the strange symbols on. Take the dice based on your Titan's innate power level, which for a Dreamwalker is 1 red die. Then, based on the weapon that you attacked with, add dice to the pool for each successful hit. The Kratos Copis, for example, is 1 red die per hit, so if you hit twice, that's another 2 red dice. And as you can see on the Dreamwalker's Kratos table, if your rage is 5 or more, that's 1 additional red die. There can be other abilities too that add dice, such as this Nemos card, which allows you to discard the card to add a red die. I'll explain discarding cards later in the video. We've just seen a lot of red dice added to the pool. The black and the white dice come in later in the campaign. And also note that there is a limited number of each dice included in the game. If you ever need more dice than you have, you would take one of a higher level instead of 2 of the lower level. So 7 red dice is actually 5 red and 1 black. Once you have your pool of dice, roll them. You need to roll a number of power symbols equal to or higher than the AT value on the body part card. And the most important rule about rolling power dice is that you cannot re-roll them with fate. However, there are some abilities on the Kratos table which allow for power rerolls. On the default Dreamwalker table, you have one reroll at Rage 2 and another at Rage 4. Like when rerolling evasion or attack dice, decide how many of these rerolls you want to use and then reroll that many dice. You only get one chance to reroll and cannot reroll the same die more than once. The next step is to use any potential symbols, which are the small triangles. These do nothing on their own, but there are ways in which you can turn them into power. The main way of doing that is with break tokens in the Kratos pool. Each break token can convert one potential into one power. There are lots of these potential symbols on the dice, so break tokens are really useful if you can get them. If the total power for the attack is equal to or greater than the AT value on the card, you have successfully wounded the primordial, and you place the BP card in the wound stack. If at this point you now have a number of wounds in the stack equal to the primordial's wound value, it is slain. The battle ends immediately. Yes, literally immediately. Which means if your Titan who was attacking was about to die from going above 9 rage, they don't. If, however, you didn't roll enough power, then you failed to inflict a wound. Step 7 is the primordial responses. As mentioned earlier, which response applies depend on whether you wounded it or not. The first thing to check is if you scored a critical hit. If you did, resolve the critical response and ignore everything else. Otherwise, if you wounded it, resolve the wound response if any. If you failed to wound it, resolve the fail response. The right mighty fist, for example, does not have a fail response, so if you fail to wound it, nothing bad happens. But if you fail to wound the knuckle teeth, you must resolve the fail response here. And if there is an instinct response, you resolve that whether you wounded it or not, unless of course you scored a critical, in which case you just resolve the critical response. There are many different types of primordial responses, ranging from knockback, pushback, and even the primordial attacking you back as revenge. Any non-attack responses are resolved immediately, such as this one, where if you fail to wound, you gain 1 danger and then suffer knockback 10. But any responses that involve an attack, such as this one, they don't happen yet. Make a mental note of what attack will happen, but finish the current attack sequence first. Then the primordial performs that attack immediately afterwards. Unless otherwise stated, responses are resolved against the Titan who caused the response. And also, a response is resolved even if the attack was from a ranged weapon. However, any knockback or knockdown responses only work if the primordial is adjacent to the Titan being attacked. So, if you throw a javelin from a distance but fail to wound and the response is gain 1 fate and knockdown, you would gain the fate but ignore the knockdown. I also just wanted to remind you about a rule from the previous video that is the difference between gaining danger and being dealt danger. If a primordial response instructs you to gain danger, that does not trigger a trauma draw, unless the danger you gain would put you above 9. Some effects in the game can cause you to ignore primordial responses, so keep an eye out for those as they are very useful. Step 8 of the attack sequence is wounds and escalation. Escalation is a key part of the inverted combat paradigm, where the primordial gets stronger the more you wound it. If you did not manage to inflict a wound, simply place the BP card in the discard pile. If at this point the BP deck is empty, shuffle the discard pile to make a new deck. If, however, you did manage to wound it, the BP card you hit will be in the wound stack, and you perform escalation. The rulebook contains the full details on how you escalate. As you can see, the type of card you wounded determines exactly how you escalate both the BP deck and the AI deck. I'll cover the basics of what escalation is here, but you should refer to the table in the rulebook carefully, certainly for your first few games. Essentially, escalation involves replacing the wounded BP card with one of the next level up from the escalation decks that you set aside during setup. So if you wound a BP 1 card, a new BP 2 card is shuffled into the deck. And you also escalate the AI deck, removing a card matching the level of the wound that you just did and replacing it with one of the next level up. The new card you add gets shuffled into the current deck, so remember to always keep an eye on what the top card is. BP3 cards are treated differently. If you do a non-critical wound on a BP3 card, then instead of adding it to the wound stack, you take one of the double wound cards and place that in the stack instead. As its name suggests, this counts as 2 wounds. Only if you do a critical wound does the BP card itself go to the wound stack. A BP3 card still counts as 2 wounds, but it is handled differently at the end of a battle. Basically, you get an extra bonus if you critically wound a BP3 card. Escalating after causing a wound to a BP3 card is more complex. But again, follow the table carefully and you should be okay. Certain effects in the game might instruct you to add another wound to the wound stack. To do so, simply place a single wound card on the stack. Before moving on, I just wanted to briefly mention that there are other effects in the game that can cause escalations of both one or both of the decks outside of wounding a primordial. Resolve these as normal, but because no BP card was removed from the wounding, remove the lowest level BP card from the battle. It's even possible for escalations to take place outside of a battle. If this happens, make a note of it somewhere and perform it during the start of battle. Step 9 of the battle sequence is to clear the Kratos pool. All those lovely tokens that you had in there which helped you hit and wound are removed. One very important rule that is often misunderstood is that the Kratos pool only clears as part of an attack sequence, which means if your Titan does not perform an attack, the pool does not clear. The final step of the battle sequence is the second ability window. This works in a similar way to the first ability window, but using abilities that can specifically be used in the second window. The most common ones are found on your Kratos table. The higher your rage, the more of these you have. For the default Dreamwalker Kratos table, at rage levels 1, 3 and 6, you get to add either an opening token or a break token to the Kratos pool. For example, your rage was 3, so you could add 2 opening tokens, 2 break tokens, or 1 of each. There are other abilities you may have which also add tokens. For example, the Siren Teeth have opening 1, which basically means add 1 opening token in the second ability window. Or the Boat Mace with break 1, which means to add 1 break token in the second ability window. You can still place opening and break tokens into the pool even if you are knocked down. Note that you can only use abilities on the weapon that you attacked with, so if you had multiple weapons equipped, you could not use the abilities on the other weapons. Adding tokens to the Kratos pool will be of benefit to the next Titan who performs an attack, and this is an important tactical decision to make based on the level of the card on the top of the BP deck and who the next Titan will be. And if one Titan was the last to take a turn in one round and the first to attack in the next round, then that next Titan is actually themselves. Some abilities require their card to be exhausted as part of the cost. To do this, turn the card 90 degrees sideways. Other cards have keywords that cause them to become exhausted. For example, the Javelin is cumbersome. If it successfully causes a wound, it is exhausted. When a card is exhausted, you cannot use it as an active weapon, you cannot use any of its defensive stats or any of its abilities, unless the ability says otherwise. Some game effects will refer to exhaustible gear. Only cards with the abilities with the exhaust icon or cumbersome keyword are classed as exhaustible. There are a number of ways in the game in which things can become unexhausted. One way is that you can use your movement or combat action to unexhaust as many of your own things as you want. Discarding is represented in the game by an icon of a card with an X on it. Whenever you are instructed to discard a card, flip it face down. You can no longer use it for the rest of the battle, but you have not lost it permanently. Discarding a token, however, means to place it back in the supply. There are also other effects in the game which cause you to exhaust or discard something. If you are instructed to remove something permanently, it is placed back in the box. This is sometimes referred to as archiving. During this video and the previous one, you may have noticed that some of the AI cards have exclamation points to the left of some of the lines. These represent windows of opportunity for Titans to react. They are always to the left side of an effect, indicating that the window happens just before the effect itself. During each window of opportunity, every Titan may activate any number of their abilities with the exclamation point icon, but no more than one with the same name. For example, you are controlling a Titan who has an Iapetus Lifeguard and an improved pattern card. Both of these have window of opportunity abilities on them, but both are named Reflex. This means that you cannot use both of them in the same window of opportunity. The most common window of opportunity ability is Reflex, which simply allows you to move one space. This is especially useful when avoiding knockdown and knockback, since those things only work if the primordial is within its attack range of you when the knockback or knockdown happens. For example, the Hecaton is attacking with its right hook. The after attack ability is knockback 5. Since this is a normal melee attack, that only works if the target is still adjacent after the attack. So you could use the ability on your Iapetus Lifeguard, which is to gain 1 fate and exhaust the card, to reflex move to here. Now you are not adjacent, so you avoid the knockback. One common mistake with these window of opportunity abilities is that they can only be used during a window of opportunity, not just whenever you want to. Let's just take another look at the right hook card for a minute. Notice that there is a window of opportunity after the target is determined, but before the attack takes place. Now, this does not mean that you can allow the primordial to move next to you and then you reflex move out of the way and avoid the attack. The window of opportunity is before the move and attack and not between. However, there is something that you can do if you are at the extent of the primordial's movement, known as an out-of-reach evade. Here, Solon is the target of Hecaton's cold open attack. Hecaton can reach him with 4 movement. Since the window of opportunity is before the move and attack line, if Solon reflexed to move to here, Hecaton would simply just move 5 spaces and still hit him. But if Solon were here instead, then Hecaton would have to move its full movement of 6 to reach him. So, after being declared the target, if Solon now reflexed to move to here, Hecaton would still just move as much as possible towards him, but then not be able to attack. And you might be thinking, why doesn't Hecaton target someone else instead, someone that they can reach? Here, for example, Solon is the closest Titan in front in range, but Herodotus is stood right next to Hecaton. If Solon does a reflex move out of range, wouldn't Hecaton just hit Herodotus instead? And the answer to that is no, because the target has already been determined, and once set, it doesn't change. The window of opportunity is specifically after the target has been determined, but before the move and attack takes place. Also note that performing an out-of-reach evade just cancels the main part of the attack card. Any after-attack effects still happen as normal, although in this case the after-attack is knockback, so that doesn't happen either because the target is no longer adjacent. Also notice that there is a window of opportunity symbol on the left of some responses. These work in exactly the same way as when resolving an AI card, giving Titans the opportunity to resolve any window of opportunity abilities. For example, you attack the Hecaton with a melee weapon and score a wound against the right mighty fist. The response is pushback 1 and gain 1 danger. Pushback is like knockback, except the primordial moves onto the vacated space. The next part of the response is knockback 5, but at this point the Titan could use a window of opportunity ability to reflex move to here, meaning that they are no longer adjacent, so the knockback doesn't work. Remember, only knockback and knockdown responses require adjacency. All other responses work as normal. For example, you throw a javelin at range 2 at the Hecaton, but fail to score a wound against the 1 in 100 BP card. The response is pushback 2, which actually moves the Hecaton to here and then pushes the Titan back 1 more. Then the Titan gains 3 danger. And finally, knockback 5, which could be avoided with a reflex move. Some trauma cards and other abilities or effects in the game can cause what is known as a chain break. When this happens during a primordial's attack, that attack immediately ends, including any after-attack effects that would follow. This is usually a cause for celebration. For example, Ulysses is attacked by Hecaton's Sucker Punch. She rolls 2 evasion dice, needing 9 or more. She gets 1 success, so is hit once, gaining 2 danger. She is now at 2 danger and draws a card from the minor trauma deck. She draws Feign Death, which chain breaks the primordial attack and causes her to become knocked down. Because of the chain break, any remaining effects of the attack are skipped, and the after attack doesn't happen. Sometimes a Titan will gain a bonus attack, such as from this trauma card. A bonus attack during the primordial's round causes a chain break, immediately ending the primordial attack and allowing the Titan to perform a bonus attack. But this only happens if the bonus attack can be performed. For example, if you gain a bonus attack and are at range, but you don't have a ranged weapon, then the attack doesn't happen, so neither does the chain break. A bonus attack is performed immediately after the current action and is resolved exactly like a normal attack. It follows all 10 steps of the attack sequence. However, for a bonus attack, you may declare an exhausted weapon as your active weapon. You unexhaust it and then continue the attack. The other special rule about bonus attacks is that you ignore any attack-related responses on the primordial BP card that you are trying to wound. In other words, if the primordial hits you during the primordial round and you draw a trauma card that gives you a bonus attack, then that bonus attack cannot cause the primordial to attack you. Any other responses, though, are resolved normally. It's only the ones that cause a primordial attack which are ignored. When a bonus attack is finished, continue resolving the battle round from when the interruption happened. It can also happen that a Titan gets a bonus attack during their turn. For example, you get a bonus attack if you score a critical hit against the Labyrinthorus's plated beast head. This is a special type of bonus attack known as a follow-up attack, and instead of causing chain break, you finish resolving the Titan's attack, and then the Titan gets another complete attack. Before moving on, I wanted to talk about the Fists card. In the tutorial, this is all the Titans have, but they get actual weapons immediately after. Fists can still be chosen at the start of battle, and they are special in that they can be one-handed or two-handed. In other words, you can have fists and a shipwrecker shield. In this case, the fists only attack with one die instead of two. If your hands are full with other gear, do not take the fists card at the start of the battle. However, if at any point you somehow lose one of your weapon cards, you can immediately equip your fists. And whenever you are about to perform an attack, you can discard an equipped weapon and equip your fists instead. And why would you want to discard a weapon just before you perform an attack, I hear you ask? Well, there are a few situations, but they are rare. If you really needed to attack and the only weapons you had were exhausted and you didn't have a spare action to ready them, you could discard one of them or even both, automatically equipping the fists. Or if the only weapon you have is a ranged weapon which cannot be used when adjacent, and in the Primordial's turn it moves to be adjacent to you, attacks you, and you get a bonus attack, then you cannot actually hit it with your ranged weapon. So you could discard it, equip your fists, and use the bonus attack. Any weapon you discard is gone from the battle, but will be returned to the armory along with all of the other weapons at the end. On your turn, in addition to your two main actions of movement and attack, you may perform any number of free actions, but each of them only once per turn. A free action can be performed either before your two main actions or after the first one and before the second. Once you have performed your second action, your turn immediately ends. There is no window to perform free actions after your second action. Also, free actions cannot be used in the middle of another action, only before an action. Free actions can be found on Nemo's cards, gear cards, and so on. The ability on Someone Waiting or this ability on the Spring Harness are both free actions that allow you to stand up. And the abilities on these two gear cards are also free actions to use. Remember, abilities with the exclamation point are not free actions. They can only be used during a window of opportunity. All movement caused by an opposing force is classed as involuntary movement and, unlike voluntary movement, must be resolved as much as possible. The most common causes of involuntary movement are knockbacks, which I've mentioned earlier, and pushbacks, which I've mentioned a couple of times, but will explain more in the next video. If, during involuntary movement, a Titan is moved into a destructible obstacle, the obstacle is destroyed and the Titan ends up in its space. The Titan suffers crash, which is +1 danger and knockdown. If moved into an indestructible obstacle, the Titan stops moving on the space just before the tile and suffers crash. If moved to the edge of the board, continue resolving any additional movement along the edge in such a way that the initial movement is away from the source. Titans ignore other Titans when moving involuntarily, but if a Titan ever ends up on the same space as another, the other Titan is displaced to an adjacent empty space of their choice. And if displacement is not possible, the Titan that would be displaced is killed. Involuntary movement doesn't always mean that a Primordial is knocking a Titan around. Sometimes it can be the other way. For example, once a Titan with this Kratos table reaches 4 rage, they have the ability to push back the Primordial. And this ability can be used during the first or second ability window. You could, for example, use it in the first ability window to push the Primordial back into this column. When a Primordial moves onto a destructible obstacle, the obstacle is removed from the board. However, if you check what is written on the terrain card, if a Titan pushes a Primordial into a column, you roll a dice and apply the effect listed. As mentioned in the previous video, you may have one or more Argo ability cards available to you during the battle. Each of these abilities may be used once per round by removing a charge from it and turning the card sideways to represent that it's been used. Argo abilities are unexhausted at the end of each round, either a Titan round or the Primordial round. Unless otherwise noted, Argo abilities can be used at any point of the Titan round, except in the middle of another action. For example, the Arrow Barrage ability cannot be used during a combat action, meaning that you cannot reveal the BP card and then add a break token. You must use it before the start of the combat action itself. And after the last Titan to act has completed their second action, the Titan round immediately ends, meaning that there is no opportunity to use Argo abilities until the next round. Moiros cards represent the consequences of trying to cheat fate one too many times. When you push fate too far, it pushes back. Although you cannot voluntarily do something which would increase your fate above 9, sometimes another effect will cause that to happen. And when it does, draw a card at random from the Moiros deck. Place it in front of you, resolve any text on it, and keep it until the end of the battle. Also, if you are ever forced to draw another Moiros card when you already have one, you die instead. Kratos cards are drawn when you temporarily lose control over your Titan and their bottomless rage takes over. When a game effect instructs you to draw a Kratos card, draw one at random. Place it in front of you, resolve any text on it, and keep it until the end of the battle. And like Moiros cards, if you are ever forced to draw another Kratos card while you already have one, you die. Some effects will give you a chance to avoid drawing a Kratos card, or at least ignoring its negative effects. This is usually done with a Kratos roll, which involves rolling a d10 and comparing your results to your current rage value. If you roll equal to or higher, you succeed and you avoid drawing the card. If it is lower, you fail and must draw the card. Kratos rolls cannot be re-rolled using fate. Unlike Argonauts, Titans are expendable. In most cases, when you die in battle, you only lose the Titan, not the Argonaut. If a Titan dies, remove them from the battle board. That Titan plays no further part in the battle. Any equipment that the Titan was carrying cannot be used by other Titans, and you don't discard any conditions or tokens it has, nor do you reset its Triskelion until the end of the battle. There are many ways for a Titan to die, which are all listed in the rulebook. There is also something called the Mercy Rule. If a Titan dies while being attacked by a Primordial, you ignore all lingering attack effects and any after-attack effects for that Titan. For example, Hecaton attacks Solon with its Furious Smash, causing enough danger to trigger an Obol draw, killing the Titan. The pushback from the after-attack is ignored. But if the attack had an effect that is separate from the Titan who was killed, those effects should still be resolved. So, if in the previous example, Hecaton was attacking with its 1-2 punch, the after-attack effect is Perform Signature, which doesn't specifically target the now dead Titan, so it is resolved. The Mercy Rule also applies if a Titan dies when attacking a Primordial. You ignore all further negative responses caused by that attack. For example, Hecaton attacks Solon, causing the Titan to draw a Grave Trauma card. He draws Heroic Life, allowing him to perform a bonus attack, but will die if he doesn't score a wound. As normal with bonus attacks, this causes a chain break, immediately interrupting the AI card and skipping its after-attack effects. Solon performs his bonus attack and he draws the Hand-Head BP card. He fails to roll enough power to break through the AT value of 5 and will therefore die from the Heroic Life card. Because of the Mercy Rule, the instinct response doesn't happen. And the Titan still gets to leave Kratos tokens in the pool. If the Titan with the priority target token dies, give the token to the Titan with the highest rage. If there is more than one, the players choose which one of those gets it. Battles can end in one of 3 different ways. You win if you meet the conditions shown in the victory section, which is usually dealing the Primordial a number of wounds equal to its wound value. You lose if you meet the conditions shown in the defeat section, which is usually all Titans getting killed. Most battles also give you a chance to retreat. You may declare a retreat only at the start of a Titan round and only if you have lost 2 or more Titans. You may only retreat if the battle specifically allows it. So in this battle, no running away. For all purposes, a retreat is treated as a loss, but it allows you to save the remaining Titans. Each battle can have unique consequences, but there are some general things that happen after one, which I'll cover here. But before proceeding, if you aren't happy with how the battle went, you may spend a Sisyphus Tear, which are a very rare and mysterious divine resource. They allow you to replay the battle. Effectively, you rewind time back to the start of the battle, resetting everything, including the Triskelions, to what they were at the start. And then you go again. You can choose different gear for your Titans and even use different Titans if you have access to them. Assuming you don't use a Sisyphus Tear, proceed to the battle aftermath. First, you must resolve any effects classed as end of battle. Then follow the steps of the battle aftermath shown in the storybook. The first step is known as the Tides of Fate. Each Argonaut resets their Triskelion values to 0. Then Argo Fate is lowered by a specific value. In cycle 1, this is usually 2. Next, you gain resources for the wounds that you inflicted on the Primordial, even if you lost the battle. For each card in the wound stack, you gain the depicted resources, multiplied by the level of the primordial. For example, if you fought a level 3 Hecaton, this card is worth 3 raw ambrosia. For each BP3 card in the wound stack, you also gain 1 primordial core in addition to the resources printed on the card. Remember that BP3 cards are only placed in the wound stack if you score a critical hit. If there are any generic single wounds and/or double wounds in the stack, combine the BP discard pile with the BP deck and separate them by level. For each single wound, draw a random BP of the lowest available level and gain its resources. For each double wound, draw a random BP3 and gain its resources. In addition, if you fight a level 3 or level 4 primordial, you gain bonus ambrosia as depicted on the primordial sheet. This is a fixed amount and not multiplied by the level. The resources you gain are used for crafting new gear as explained in a previous video. Certain critical effects can cause the primordial to die immediately, even if it hasn't taken the required number of wounds. In this case, follow the rules in the rulebook to add extra wounds into the wound stack until you have a number of wounds in the stack equal to the wound value of the primordial. This ensures that even if you get a quick kill, you still gain the resources you deserve. Next, discard all conditions and any tokens from Titans, and note the loss of any Titans on your Argo sheet. And a quick note that isn't specifically mentioned in the rulebook, but you want to keep a tally of how many Titans have been killed somewhere, as that information may be needed later on. Finally, if you've just played a timeline battle, each exploration card that was removed from the deck until the next timeline battle is shuffled back into the deck. The Olympian gods were killed during the eschaton. With their worshippers scattered and their temples abandoned, their power waned and left the world. But not completely. During your campaign, you will unlock the ability to awaken. When this happens, a glimmering ember of the old gods reignites and you find yourself filled with divine power. When you first unlock the ability to awaken, you will be told to take a god form card, and the first one you get is Zeus, but you will unlock more as the campaign progresses. Whenever an effect instructs you to awaken, choose one of the god forms available to you and place its card over your Titan's illustration. On the Argo sheet, write the name in the god form section and mark the associated box. That god form is now unavailable to you until you trigger a Divine Surge event, at which point all of your notes in the god forms and summoning sections are removed. If there are no available god forms, you cannot awaken. The rulebook lists a number of things that happen when you do awaken. Make sure that you follow these steps carefully. They include performing a chain break, gaining the priority target token, standing up, performing a move or pushback, and then a bonus attack. You also take a number of trespass tokens as shown here and place them nearby. At the start of each of your turns, you must discard 1 trespass token. If you are unable to because you have run out, return the Godform card to the supply. You lose all of the bonuses provided by it. Then, if you awakened as the result of an Obol draw, you die. If you awakened through any other means, after you have ended your awakening, continue resolving your turn as normal. Note that some other god form abilities may also use tokens for other effects, and if you are ever knocked down, you may spend one of these tokens to immediately stand up. While you are awakened, you use the god form power die instead of your normal Titan one. You also gain all of the bonuses listed at the bottom of the god form card. Some god forms allow you to perform a special attack. These use the details on the god form card and cannot be combined with your weapons. The god form card itself is considered to be your active power instead of an active weapon. When you are about to perform an Obol draw, shuffle this card into the Obol deck before you draw, and then remove it afterwards. In other words, your chance of survival is higher during an Obol draw. Many abilities and effects will instruct you to perform a test. The carving ability on this Kratos Copis, for example, allows you, when you inflict a wound, to make a wisdom check of 8+ to gain some resources. These tests are resolved in the same way as you would normally resolve tests. You roll a d10, which you can re-roll with fate, add on your Argonaut skill if applicable, and compare the result to the difficulty of the test. As usual, if something allows you to add a bonus to the test, then unless otherwise stated, all of that must be declared before you roll the die. Moving on to the subject of keywords, there are loads of them in this game, and you will find them all over your gear cards. Sometimes 2 effects with the same keyword stack, and sometimes they don't. If the keyword is followed by a number, they stack. Otherwise, they don't. unless of course stated otherwise. So if you have two sources of the opening keyword, for example, opening one from the Siren Teeth and opening one from this ability on the Kratos table, then they do stack, and you effectively have opening two. But if you have two sources of the keyword deadly, then you just have it once. The keywords ranged and reach specifically state in their description that multiple sources of those keywords do not stack. And that is the end of this video. In part 5, I'll be covering some more detailed rules about the first cycle of the game, including some additional rules such as zone attacks, pushback, and a number of other things that I haven't covered so far. I hope you found this video useful in learning how to play Aeon Trespass Odyssey. As usual, please give the video a like, leave me a comment, and subscribe to the channel. And as I mentioned earlier, I do rely on the support of my Patreon campaign to help keep the channel going. So if you are in a position to be able to support me directly, please visit patreon.com/gamingrules for exclusive access to the Gaming Rules community and some additional bonus content. Until next time, take care, and thanks for watching.